So functions are of three types. There is a function with return type, function with parameter, and function default function. Right? Now, what do we mean by function with what do we mean by function with return type? So let's say I create a function, right? And in this function I'm taking the input from the user. And now what this function is doing, this function is taking the input and adding, right? It is doing both the things, right? But this function is not serving all the purpose. See, when you create a function, right? The function should have minimal responsibility. You should not put everything in the single function. That is not a good design. Because with that, what will happen? You'll not be Your function will be not flexible enough to use in all the scenarios. It will become specific to few scenarios, right? Now, if I create this function, right, this function I can use for addition, but addition only when the user is giving the input. What if I want to add without taking the input from the user? I have the data in the file or database. From there, I want to take the data and do addition. Can I use this function? I cannot use, right? Because whenever you call this function is going to take the input from the user. Next thing is, I don't want to print. Here I'm printing. In some of the scenarios, I don't want to print the output. Maybe I want to use that output in the next set of logic. I'm calculating something, I'm getting the output. That output I'm passing to another function, and then there I'm implement using into some other logic. But when I use this function is going to always print. So this function is not flexible. Why it is not flexible? Because it is doing multiple responsibility it is taking care of, right? So when you create a function, right, just keep one thing in mind, that your function should be, don't give the controller control to all the function. Make few of the function controlling function who will be controlling whom to call and get the data and then pass it to some other function, get the data and then pass it to the third function. In this, if I start using this in the calculator, let's say I create a calculator, and here if I ask the user that enter the choice, what do you want to do? One to add, two to subtract, three to multiply, and four to divide. What do you want to do? If choice equal to 1, then call add. Similarly, let me define subtract, multiply, and here I can put, if choice is equal to 2, subtract, and if choice is equal to 3, multiply. right? Now when I call calculator, see again, whatever we are discussing today, this comes under designing. How to design your application program, right? If you write everything in one function, that is also fine. You'll get the output. If you write without function, then also you'll get the output. And if you start segregating multiple function, then also you get the output. Now the question is, which program is better? Quality, and which program can be extended? Right? Can be extended means can be reusable, can be expandable. Tomorrow, if I get new requirement, then I can easily make the changes. Because once you write the code, you have to maintain the code throughout, right? It's not like you have written today and then you forget. You have to keep maintaining, keep fixing the error. So how to design in a way that the maintenance will be low, code duplicacy will not be there, it will be more flexible, right? If there are some changes that we need to do, then it can be done easily, right? So there are certain principles that just you have to keep in mind while writing the program. The first is dry principle. That means do not repeat yourself. That means whatever code you are writing, that should not be repeated. If it's getting repeated, create a function, common function, and start calling the function in all the places wherever you want to repeat. Right? It should have single responsibility. Function should always contain single responsibility. Not even function. If you are creating a file and inside the file you're writing the functions, collection function, then the file should contain single responsibility. That means I should not create a file where I'm putting the user module, login, logout, and payment, create payment, cancel payment, right? Payment should go to the payment file. User login, logout should go to the user file. Single responsibility. So tomorrow, if I want to reuse the login, I just need to use the user module. And while using the user module, you're not giving the payment, which I don't need. So we should always create a segregation based on the logical segregation based on the component based, right? So once we do that, then it should be single responsibility, and always your program should be open for modification, not for change. With small modification, you should be able to adapt the new changes. Or you should not say like I need to rewrite again everything. That should not be the case. It should be extendable. If more load come on your system, more people are using your application, your program should be scalable. So those things you have to keep in mind. So whatever designing we are talking about, you not see that designing is written like okay, this is the correct way. It purely depends on how what is thought process and how you're designing it. But this 4 to 5 points: single responsibility, loosely coupled, right? No code duplicacy, right? Reusability. These are the things that you have to keep in mind while writing down the program. And this will not happen in the first time. It's obvious that first it needs some practice. But first time, if you could write some program, write in whatever manner you want, start getting the output, and then think how to optimize this. That should be your first approach. Once you keep doing this over the period of time, maybe like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, in the initial phase while writing the program, you will know like how to write. Right? So I've created this function. Now, can you tell me like, do, do we have duplicate codes here? Do we have duplicate code? We have, right? We are taking A and B in every function, right? A and B is coming in every function. Second thing is, if you look at this calculator, so what calculator is doing? Calculator is a main function. Calculator is a controller. Why I'm calling this as a controller? Because this is calling all the functions based on the condition, right? So this is the integration. Add function is independent, sub is independent, multiply is independent, but calculator is integrating, calling everyone. So calculator is the controller. But the controller part I am not giving to the calculator, like I am calling add, right? And I see that add, subtract, and multiply printing the output. So controlling is not coming back to the calculator function, right? So we should always design a function as much as possible in a way that if calculator is calling add function should do the summation and give the output to calculator. Now calculator will decide whether to print or not. Let calculator decide whether to print or use in the next logic. Add function should not be worried about that. Add function work is just to add, right? But here that's not the case, right? Which means the first thing we have to do is we have to take out this. And create the function. And then I can call this commonplace, right? And then I'm calling calculator, one add, pass the number. I'm getting error. Where I'm getting error? In add function line number this print. What is the error? A is not defined. Why I'm getting A is not defined error? It's not in global, there is no enclosing scope. Take input and add are siblings. And sibling function do not share with anything with each other, right? Either it should be parent child or it should come from the global. We have only four scope, right? Global, local, enclosing, and built-in. But take input contains A and B, which is local to take input. Add function is using A and B, which is local to add. And we have not defined anything inside add function, right? Which means in this scenario, what we need to do is we need to return. This function is to return the data explicitly. Take input should explicitly return that okay, I'm giving this data. Now wherever you call take input will execute and give the data back. If this is giving the data back, then I should do this. I should do this, right? That means take input is giving two data, so I'm creating two variable. Now this two variable could be anything. You need not be A and B. One, 12, 11. I'm sorry. Right? We are just calling take input. Take input is getting called, and then data is returned, which is getting stored into C and D. Right? We can use. Now again this is but this is not independent, right? If I want to call add function without taking the input, I want to take the data from database. I cannot reuse this function, right? So what if I remove this from here and call the take input here? I can do this. In, take input was inside add. Bought, I took it outside and I'm putting outside the add inside calculator. You just need to know the sequence. When you execute calculator, then that is the function which executes. So I bought it outside the calculator, outside add function. Now in this case, what happened? Add function became independent. It is just adding. Now you use add function anyway. If you make it global A and B, then the problem is what if the same variable is being used somewhere else, right? So always make global if it's required. Otherwise, don't make everything public, right? Now when I'm calling add function, where I have A and B, I have A and B here. How can I pass it to add function? Because add function does not contain anything, right? How can I add C and D? Where is C and D? There's no C and D, right? So we have to define this as a parameter and then pass it here, A comma B. That means when you're calling the function and you have to give some data to the that function while calling, then it goes as a parameter, function with a parameter. When the function executes and after executing you want some data back, then it should be returned. That's how we can communicate between two functions. Let's say we have function A and function B. Function A is calling function B and function A is passing some data to function B as a parameter. Function B is processing and giving back as a return. That's what is. So calculator in add function is communicating in that manner, right? Calculator is calling take add function and passing the data that okay, these are the data you add and give me back the result. So it is taking, adding and returning the result. If the result is getting, so instead of printing return, if it's returning the result, can I store it here? And then I can see what I need to do with the result, whether I want to print or not. This becomes easy, right? Now, if I want to create a scientific calculator, new version of calculator, I can reuse everything. I can reuse the add function, right? If I define this, I can reuse the subtract function. Everything can be reused, right? Because these are independent. This is not depending on the calculator. Calculator is just integrating, calling it. But still I can use in all the other functions. So it became a common code, right? You just want to use add function. You can call add also. Now it does not matter for add function from where you are taking the input. You just give the data, whether you're taking from file, from user, from other function, you just give the data, it will add and give you the result back. So it is now flexible enough, loosely coupled, right? It is independent. You can use it in any manner, right? So this is how we create the function. Function with return type, function with parameter, and function with optional parameter. Now there would be chances that I can make this as optional by defining the default value. Now what does the optional parameter do? Optional parameter, if you are not passing, it takes a default value. If you are passing, then it takes that value, right? So many times when you do the registration online, what happens? Email ID is mandatory, last name is optional, right? So that there is a function with optional parameter, right? Can you execute this? I'll just move. Yeah, division also we need to. So just execute this. Okay. So are you executing? You can copy the code from here. Clear? Okay. Since I have defined add as a optional parameter, right? Add function with optional parameter. So I can call the add function, pass one parameter, 99, right? So 9 I am passing, 90 is a default value. I am calling add function and passing 1 comma 2. And it is taking that value which I am passing. Okay. One thing which we have to keep in mind is default value should always be on the rightmost side. I cannot do this. So first you have to define the mandatory parameter and then you have to define the optional parameter. I can have multiple optional parameters, but it should be on from the rightmost side. Okay, clear? Fine. So this completes the types of functions. What you guys can do is try creating calculator, scientific, programmer, and normal. Three calculator I need. In normal calculator, we'll have add, multiply, division, and subtract. In scientific, we'll have add, multiply, division, subtract, and power. And in programmer, we'll have add, multiply, division, subtract, and square root. Right? Now design this using function concept. Right? We should not duplicate the code. It should be reusable. Right? So those things you have to keep in mind. And then design, because add function is being used in all these three calculator, right? Understood? Fine. Fine. Thanks, Sanjay and Sumit. We'll continue tomorrow.